Everybody talks about missing or ignoring red flags, but what are some subtle green flags to watch for on a date or with your crush? Admitting when they're wrong, apologizing, taking responsibility. My dad always apologized to me when I was a child. I now realize how many adults refuse to apologize or acknowledge how they've hurt their child due to ego, etc. I really value now when an adult can say they were wrong and are sorry, especially to a child. Being the person to make contact when you carry on with your day-to-day life. I used to go through periods of complete seclusion where I couldn't bring myself to talk to anyone. Before she was my wife, she was the only person that would go out of her way to email me or get a message to me asking how my week was going. No other girlfriend ever did that. If I didn't log on to MSN and strike up a conversation or send the first text, I wouldn't get anything. I kept every email she sent me. Turns out she has all of mine in a folder too. Be able to laugh together, without being concerned what sound you make and what you look like while laughing. I once snorted while laughing with my crush and we just looked at each other and started pissing ourselves all over again. Meanwhile our mutual friend just stood there chuckling. Positive interactions with people they have no stake or direct gain in knowing. On my third date with my now wife, we were walking in Lower Manhattan. I found an envelope on the sidewalk and went to the building it was addressed to in order to make sure the recipient got it. She said it was this small little thing that made her think I was a keeper. They listen to what you say and ask you related, follow-up questions, rather than spending most of the time talking themselves. I found that working in sales has drastically improved my dating game because this is exactly what you are taught to do. Manners, compromise, non-judgmental, takes responsibility. Manners is good in theory but in reality it isn't a reliable green flag. Seems like bad parents always compensate with over-teaching please and thank you, so it's just language or gestures for a lot of adults and not an indicator of anything else. Being able to enjoy silence with each other. How they act if they have to explain something to you or help you. Any situation really where they end up being dominant, in a lack of a better word. Do they make you feel good or stupid, weak in that situation? Personally, I want to see depth of character, curiosity and compassion. Instead of talking about shallow things and gossiping, complaining, does he have some level of introspection and focus his energy on being a better person? Rather than being quick to judge others, he would be curious about human nature, people's motivations, and what in their life caused them to become what they are. I just find people like this make better and more interesting partners. Resourcefulness, being polite to both you and the people that they interact with. Consistent behavior from that person. Maybe that isn't subtle, but I think it's a good green flag, in any case. Underrated comment. As I've gotten older I've started to realize that inconsistent behavior is never a good sign. I value calmness and stability in my relationship, and if your behavior is inconsistent I'm always a little nervous about which version of you I'm dealing with, and why. And which one is the real you, hint, it's never the good one. At any sign of inconvenience like you being late or some sort of mistake taking place, them displaying a calm practical manner and moving on in an appropriate time frame. They are kind to waiting staff at restaurants, bars, pubs etc. almost always a good sign. I think genuine interest in what you're passionate about and talking about. Like, they listen to you, try to understand even if they're not really into your hobby that much themselves, they ask questions or make nice comments about your thing and they encourage you about it. Talking to someone like that makes you feel anything but being annoying and it's wonderful. Because, if you truly like someone, it shouldn't matter that much what they're talking about, just seeing them so happy should be a great feeling for you too. You'd want to make them happy. Staying off their phone, if they get a call or text and immediately ignore it and put their phone on silent when they're with you, then a marriage proposal should be in order. I might have a very special love at first sight kind of thing going on, but the girl and I went to an Asian grocery store and had the time of our lives. We were running around laughing and joking, just having the greatest time. So I think a green flag is just how smoothly things go. If it is no issue at all and almost feels like no effort is needed to make a date, especially at a grocery store, happen, then I believe that to be a good indicator. That's great, but it's temporary though. Something you have to eventually accept is that level of excitement isn't going to stick around forever even if you both stay in love. Eventually things settle down, and if you are always expecting every single interaction and every single moment with them to go smoothly or be exciting, you're only setting yourself up to be disappointed. Being able to enjoy the little, quiet moments with each other is just as important. If they actually reach out to you on their own, compliment you without you doing it first, and remember things you have told them. Lots of people put up with shit because a huge portion of the population is too selfish to do these simple things, and their partners don't realize how unhealthy not doing those things is. If it's a first date, look at their fingernails. It's easy to spray on some kind of cologne or pop a mint to make yourself look fresher, but if they have clean nails, it means they make an effort to look after themselves and took the time to look nice for the date. My fingernails never get an opportunity to be dirty 'cause I bite 'em off as soon as they come out. I like to build worlds and make characters and write occasionally. I've got hundreds of characters. When I meet someone and they are legitimately curious about all the weird things I'm thinking, I am so flattered. If they ask me about my stories, I feel like they really want to know me inside. I guess that sounds stupid. If you can, see if they're a good cook. Men and women. Cooking takes patience, skill, and, to put in effort means they're not only interested, but trying to impress. That they're kind also when they don't get anything for it. Met my BF during college, and the whole class rented some cabins in a ski resort. I fell asleep on the couch after a party, and woke up with a blanket and a bottle of water next to me. Another friend told me he did it, he never talked about it. He also picked up trash from the ground and threw it in a bin on our first date. He's just very, very kind. Being fully present with a focus on you, but not ignoring the environment. As opposed to having their attention divided up between phone, looking for clues what you want them to be, how they look when saying, doing stuff, the stock market, whatever happened during the day, what Karen said during lunch, what their ex texted yesterday, and did I turn off the stove. Curiosity about you as a person, but not intrusive, and relaxed with that going both ways. Non-judgmental and not looking for validation. Actually trying to understand what you said instead of trying to segue when something doesn't make sense. No one looks stupid for saying, "Sorry, I didn't understand," or "What does X mean?" and it also shows interest. They don't try to be liked by everyone, and they are okay with the idea that not everyone is going to like them. It can be hard to spot, but I do think it shows someone who is content with who they are, and has a good self-esteem and knowledge about themselves. When you talk about a hobby or interest they don't yet, maybe, share, they at least express interest and learn some about it. Bonus if they try to find sources other than you to learn on their own. Non-required pleasantries with people you interact with, like holding open doors and having a light conversation with waiters and waitresses. How close they get to you physically. My girlfriend mentioned that months after we started dating, I sat close to you. What other sign did you need? Apparently I was rather dense at making the first move. Edit. Autocorrect said sense instead of dense. Being able to have a good conversation with them where you both participate equally is huge for me. For me it's a good predictor of a healthy dynamic in a relationship. If all someone does in a conversation is talk about themselves, ignore what you're saying and interrupt you, the relationship probably isn't going to be much different. Take note of how they deal with people of a lower social standing. We tend to be nice to people of the same social strata as ourselves, but are often dismissive or mean towards waiters, restaurant staff, janitors, and so on. How a person behaves with people irrespective of their social standing is a good metric to gauge how people will behave in the long run. Someone who can recall what you said earlier 20 minutes ago and ask you a question about it. It shows they are really listening to you and not just waiting to speak, and their questions shows insight into why they ask that particular question. This happened when I met a new friend, but I think it's important. I'm normally the super quiet kid in class. I don't think many people realized I could talk. This guy who sat at the back of my class I had never really talked to beforehand noticed me sitting on the floor watching the teacher while the rest of the class was standing and listening. He came over and asked me if I was okay, which I was. I just enjoy sitting in corners and on the floor. As a person who has a lot of trust issues, this actually meant a lot to me. It showed he was really kind to even people he didn't know. We ended up becoming really good friends. Showing that they actually listen to something you said and make even the smallest move to care your needs. Example, I was set up on a blind date. We went for coffee and ice cream. While walking to the ice cream place, he mentioned that he usually prefers shakes to ice cream cones. I mentioned that I usually get a dish but also don't like cones. We talked about how no matter what, ice cream at home is never as good as from a shop. I said that at home I often eat ice cream with a teaspoon to avoid brain freeze. Like 15 minutes later, after we ordered and sat down, he went back to the counter and asked for a taste test spoon and brought back to me saying, "Here, now you won't get a brain freeze." It was a super small act, but made a huge impression on me. This may be a little more green flag in a relationship, but one time I was playing video games while my husband was in the kitchen, pretty much right next to each other in our small apartment. I was having a blast, half talking to him, half stream of consciousness rambling, yelling at my teammates, making myself laugh, etc. The round ended and I realized I had been talking non-stop for 5 minutes straight. I sheepishly said to my husband, "I'm sorry, I've been babbling endlessly and you haven't responded the whole time." He replied, "I've been listening to you babble for 5 years straight." Newsflash, I like it, honestly that meant too much to me. Around other people, I tend to be quiet and withdrawn, so for me to happily ramble was my true self, and he liked my true self. I guess the green flag is someone loves you at your youiest, not the shell you put on for everyone else. That time passes by without you knowing, even after a number of dates, hangouts. I've been dating my boyfriend for 3 years now, had a crush on him for 7 years prior to that. Even after being close friends for a decade, I still look at the watch and be surprised that we talked about the most random shit for 4.5 hours. It shows that your personality and humor clicks, which is very important for a successful relationship. Honesty. It makes everything secure. My partner plays the drums in various wedding bands or pub bands, so on a weekend he will usually be out till 12:30 a.m. or later. When a girl flirts with him, he's a good-looking guy and most of the girls have had a few drinks. He comes home, tells me and we have a giggle. He lets them down easy usually by talking about our baby daughter then me. Seeing he is a happy family man usually does the trick, smiley face. We share everything, even the bad stuff, and in the long run it built such a solid foundation. We are both completely in love with the other and have no worry about something being wrong, because if there is we would just say. You get the sense that they are completely willing to be seen. This doesn't mean they overshare or seem desperate to tell you their life story. They are simply comfortable with who they are. They can laugh at themselves. They know themselves well and like who they are despite their known flaws. They don't just treat themselves this way. The above allows them to be curious about you without being pushy. They aren't investigating, they are really listening. They can poke fun at you in a fun-loving way. They accept their own flaws, so they easily accept yours. All this leads to something simple: safety. If this person accepts themselves completely as they are, they'd likely accept me as I am too. They're a safe person to develop a trusting bond with. Source: like 6 books on attachment science.